Have you ever looked at something everyone else had already given up on and seen a future no one else could imagine? On the edge of a quiet valley stood an old farm that had been abandoned for nearly 20 years. Its barn leaned dangerously to one side. The fences had collapsed. Weeds covered the fields where crops once grew. Most people didn't even slow down as they drove past. To them, the farm was already dead. Then, one cool spring morning, a dusty pickup truck rolled slowly down the old dirt road. Behind the wheel was a young woman, carrying little more than a toolbox, a backpack, and a dream everyone else believed was impossible. She stepped out, looked across the abandoned land, smiled quietly, and whispered, "You're not finished yet." Curtains moved in nearby windows. The neighbors had already noticed. One man laughed. "She'll be gone before summer." Another shook his head. "That place has defeated better farmers than her." She never argued. She never tried to convince anyone. She simply picked up an old shovel and started working. Every swing uncovered years of neglect, rusted tools, broken fences, stones hidden beneath the weeds. By sunset, her hands were blistered. Her clothes were filthy. The farm barely looked different. But that night, she didn't think about everything that still needed to be done. Instead, she celebrated the small patch of land she had already reclaimed, because she understood something many people never do. Great transformations never happen all at once. They begin with one difficult day. Every morning before sunrise, while the valley was still asleep, the steady sound of her shovel echoed through the fields. Day after day, she cleared weeds, removed rocks, repaired broken fences, and slowly uncovered the forgotten beauty beneath years of neglect. The work was painfully slow. Some days, after 10 exhausting hours, it looked as though she had accomplished almost nothing. Yet every evening, she sat quietly on the porch, looking across the land, not for what it was, but for what it could become. Instead of planting crops immediately, she did something no one expected. She studied the soil. She dug small test holes across the fields. She watched where rainwater naturally flowed. She learned which parts of the land received the longest hours of sunlight. From a distance, it didn't even look like farming. To the neighbors, it looked like another waste of time. One afternoon, two neighbors stopped beside the fence. "You know," one of them said, "you could save yourself a lot of trouble if you just sold this place." She smiled politely. "Maybe." Then she returned to work. Deep down, she wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She was trying to prove herself right. A few days later, an elderly farmer stopped his old truck beside the road. He climbed out slowly, scooped up a handful of soil, rubbed it gently between his fingers, and smiled. Before leaving, he spoke just one sentence. "The land always remembers the people who care for it." Those words stayed with her. From that day on, she stopped thinking about saving a farm. She started thinking about healing the land. She planted cover crops. She spread compost. She restored the soil instead of rushing toward a quick harvest, even though she knew she might not see results for months. Autumn arrived. For the first time, tiny green shoots began pushing through the soil. Every morning, she walked the rows carefully, checking each young plant and protecting every seedling as though it were priceless. Then the weather changed. Dark clouds rolled over the valley. The wind grew stronger. The forecast warned of the worst storm the region had seen in years. Farmers rushed to protect what they could. She secured loose equipment, reinforced the greenhouse, and cleared the drainage channels she had dug months before. Then, the storm arrived. Rain pounded the fields. Powerful winds bent the young crops. Thunder echoed across the valley throughout the night. Inside the old farmhouse, she couldn't sleep. She listened helplessly as the storm battered everything she had spent months rebuilding. Before sunrise, the rain finally stopped. She stepped outside, afraid of what she might find. Fallen branches covered the yard. Part of the old fence had collapsed. Mud stretched across the property. With every step toward the fields, her heart beat faster. She prepared herself for the worst. But when she reached the first row, she stopped. The crops were still standing. Months earlier, while everyone had laughed, she had restored the soil, planted cover crops, and built proper drainage channels. Those quiet decisions had protected the farm when it mattered most. Across the valley, many farms suffered serious damage. But hers still had a chance. For the first time, the neighbors stopped laughing. The morning after the storm,
something unusual happened. Cars began pulling into the old gravel driveway, not to mock her, but to see the farm for themselves. Farmers from nearby towns walked through the fields in silence. They examined the soil. They studied the healthy crops. Finally, one of them asked, "How did your farm survive?" She smiled. "I didn't prepare for the harvest. I prepared for the storm." Those words spread throughout the valley. Soon, more people came, not to criticize her, but to learn from her. Weeks later, harvest season finally arrived. The fields that had once been covered with weeds were now overflowing with healthy crops. Friends, volunteers, and even former critics worked side by side, gathering baskets of fresh produce. Laughter filled the farm once again. But this time, it was laughter filled with joy. Trucks arrived throughout the day. Fresh vegetables were carefully loaded into crates, destined for markets, restaurants, and families. The old barn that had once stood abandoned was alive again. Months passed. The broken fences were rebuilt. The fruit trees bloomed once more. Life returned to every corner of the farm. Visitors traveled from distant towns, hoping to learn the secret behind its remarkable transformation. One afternoon, the same neighbor who had laughed on the very first day quietly approached her. He looked across the thriving fields and softly admitted, "I was wrong." She smiled. There was no anger, no pride, only gratitude. Because she had never started this journey to prove anyone else wrong. She had simply believed the farm deserved another chance. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the valley, she looked across the land and realized something. Restoring the farm had changed more than the fields. It had changed her. Every blister, every setback, every lonely sunrise, every exhausting day, they had all become part of something beautiful. Sometimes the world only sees abandoned fields, but vision sees possibilities. Sometimes people laugh at dreams they don't understand. But time has a remarkable way of revealing the value of quiet determination. Because every great harvest begins long before the first seed breaks through the soil. It begins with someone who refuses to give up.
If this story inspired you, subscribe to ThriveFarm, because somewhere, on another forgotten piece of land, another extraordinary story is just beginning.